Hi, my name's Amanda Cox and this is my Adapt and Extend presentation. Now there's no doubt that the library is well used, but it certainly has its faults. The circulation in the library itself is absolutely awful. The two main staircases in the middle of the library cannot cope with the amount of traffic that is required, and the spaces tend to be overcrowded and noisy. Hopefully within my new proposal these problems shouldn't occur. Now, my original concept, I wanted to create something that looked a little bit like a mini city. Now obviously Adapt and Extend meant I had to change the building rather than create something from scratch. So I started looking at different precedents, two in particular that had their extensions on the roofs. Now I thought this was a brilliant idea due to the fact that I didn't want to cut any of the surrounding trees down, and I thought creating views from higher up in the building would be fantastic. So I looked at the Oxo building and Tate Modern, who have both had older buildings in the same way that I do, and had to extend upwards. Now I've also looked at the Yale University Library. Because our project was circled around an archive, I wanted to make the most of that by putting it on display rather than in the basement. Movement was a massive issue within obviously the current design of the library, so I started to work through that myself by creating these different flowcharts, and I created the system of organising spaces between how much noise I anticipated the space to make. So you've got your red spaces in the middle, which were your sort of more social, chattier areas, followed by your quieter spaces on the outside, and then quiet again further out you go. Now I've stuck to the same principle throughout my entire design. I started off looking at different models. Now I found it much easier to develop my ideas using the models so that I could see how the structural components would work within the building itself. I then want to model block models within the library itself. Now I started off just by modelling the library, then went on to look at several different ideas of how to extend upwards and how that would fit in with the appearance of the current library. Now, during this project we looked at many different ways of creating libraries for the future. Now, my key principle that I've decided to use was the 24-hour city. Now that is an idea based on trying to create enough services for people to not necessarily have to leave the library if they wanted to. They could stay there and study for an entire day. I also wanted to include some more modern ideas of how people retain information and different ways in which they can do so. Now, looking at the plans, I've started off by looking at the basement. Now, instead of coming into the building on a sort of half level, I've taken it down so that you come down and then into the building to try and improve the entrance for the space. And due to the fact that the floors in my building get smaller as you go up, this creates an atrium, so you should come into the front and back doors into a light, airy and very sort of tall space. The back way is also improved massively by the fact that you do come in and it feels like an entrance rather than coming into a back door. Now you've got an archive space in the middle, which is, like I said about the Yale University Library, it's on display for everybody to see that we have an archive. I wanted to use the spaces around the archive as well for a gallery, because currently people don't really know where the gallery is, and I wanted to create it so that you have to walk past it. There's also a small cafe area downstairs for things like sandwiches and teas and coffees, nothing too substantial, just small, so you can whiz in, grab yourself a coffee if you wanted and whiz out again, or just sit there with your friends. Now, moving up the building onto the first floor, as you can see the archive is still in the centre. It's a 2-storey archive with a small spiral staircase in the middle so you can move up and down. The books will be around the outside, and there will be a study space in the middle of it. There's also the lecture theatre in the original double height space, which is easy to access. If you enter the back door, you only have to go up one flight of stairs to walk into the lecture theatre. Now that reduces traffic for the rest of the building if, for example, people are just coming to a lecture and leaving again. You also see these closed off spaces around the outside, and they're just glass separated study spaces to allow people to study within the different noise zones without having interruption of the previous noise zone into theirs. It just creates another acoustic barrier from the outside to the inside of where you want to be and where you want to study. Now you can also see to the right hand side that there is the offices, easy to get to if you wanted to ask somebody a question, and they also have their own internal staircase to go up to the next floor with more offices in. Now if we go up another floor, you can see that the archive is no longer in the centre. Like I said, the archive is only a 2-storey, so then it's been replaced by the study pods, which you've got 4 of them in the middle, which you could rent out from the library if you wanted to use them. And again, you've got your different study areas and offices to the right. Now if you go up again, not much has changed again, apart from the fact that I've introduced a video and audio library. Now, like I said before about the way that different people learn, I think it's important to incorporate different areas of what a library would be in the future into the current library design. Now, people like to learn by listening to things. I urge you to listen to your music or rent or take away music with you, as well as videos, cartoons and anything else you wish to, but it will be a headphones only area, so it won't be music blaring around and making lots of noise and interrupting other people. Now the next slide, study based on light that we did earlier on in the term. I wanted to include this within just so that you can understand the shading method that I've used. The floor plans, I've tried to imagine what the light situations would be within the building itself. So into the centre of the building, extra lighting will be required, not just natural lighting itself. Now I would suggest for these areas to use LED lighting, as fluorescent lighting tends to cause a lot of headaches and things with people, and also uses far more electricity than LED lighting. Right, as we go up to the next floor, you can see again, very similar. There is a small sort of internal staircases from one of the video library levels to another, just so that if somebody did want to see one thing that was just upstairs, they didn't have to walk all the way to the middle to go upstairs to go see them again. And this just continues from the internal staircase that was in the offices. Now if you go up to the floor above, which is the additional one that I've added, you'll see quite a few changes. Now, I've incorporated a gym within this section, which some people might think to be slightly strange. But I've seen lots of people whilst I've been going to the gym, reading books whilst they're on different machines, which I think is a fantastic way of combining exercise and learning. Also, if you're downstairs and you've been sat on the same chair for, I don't know, a couple of hours reading your book, then you may want to go upstairs, use a treadmill, stretch your legs for a bit, then go back down and carry on studying. Like I said before, it's incorporating the extra services that allows people to stay within the building without having to go out, do something else and then come back again, potentially losing their spot that they've been studying at all day. I've also incorporated showers, so if you did have quite an intense workout, you can shower and then leave again. Now next door to that is a small cinema screen, or a very small additional lecture theatre if needs be, but this is for screening the cartoons in the archive and for special events. It's not to compete with the Gulbenkian, but say if you had a small group in the same way that you did in a study pod, you could rent out the screening area to watch something, say for film study students or something like that. There's also a restaurant which will serve far more complicated meals than the cafe downstairs, so you won't have to leave the library to eat dinner. You can stay within the building and have your main meal. There's also outside terraces and outside study spaces. This is to incorporate the fantastic view that you'll have from the top of the library, and also create a nice place for people to study, not only inside in a stuffy room, but they can also go and study outside on the roof of the library without actually leaving the building. Now if you look at some of the details that I've put in, I've shown how I've incorporated the different planting within the roof. You can see that there's different raised beds and everything on there. And that is a rough sort of layout to what I'd imagine the landscaping on the roof to look like. There's also a roof detail there which incorporates the beams required to raise the building, as well as the planting levels that will be needed to landscape the roof. You can see by the elevations how the extension itself fits in, and as well as how the middle section looks within the contrast of the rest of the building, and these different areas of squared clear glass that are surrounded by insulated glass. Now this is seen a bit closer later, which I will explain, but I wanted to use insulated glass because it doesn't allow you to see straight out onto the outside, so you can't get distracted so much by what's going on outside, but it gives you this glow of light, which it doesn't really reduce the amount of light that you get on the inside of the building, and also it's better for the environment because it is insulated. And the clear glass areas will be those cut out shapes as you can see on the elevations. Now, the next section I've included because I was trying to get my head around the structure of the building itself and how I'd have to alter it to add it on the top. You can also see the staircases through the middle, which is how the circulation's been improved. You've got two very substantial staircases. You can also see by the blue section that's highlighted the extra ½ metre that I've had to add onto the top for beams, which allow me to create the extra weight that's on the roof. Now, you can't just build on a current roof, so I've had to incorporate those extra beams, which you can see on the next slide. The blue beams go from the two original sides, and the red beams go between those. So you've got the blue beams, which are your primary structure, and your red beams, which are your secondary structure. I've tried to replicate how the structural components will work within the model itself. Now, for the columns that are placed within the central sections of the extension itself, I've followed those columns up from the previous floors. Those columns clearly within the model itself, so you can see exactly how the weight transfers from the top section all the way down through the columns. Now the next section is straight through the middle of the new middle of the library itself, which is the new design that I've put in. You can see the floor, the concrete shape for the floor level is smaller at the two ends and get larger in the middle with the two beams. Now I've done this because it allows not only for the floor level to look thinner from the outside, it also allows me to use those cantilevers on the outside without having to put structural beams on the outside. You can also see from this section how the air flows through. Now I've incorporated shutters on towards the base of the building, so the air can flow through the base and up the atrium and out the top again. The cold air will come through the bottom, will warm up as it rises up through the building, and then out the top in through more shutters again. And this will create a natural ventilation system for the centre of the building. Now if you look to the next slide, there are some details which you can see these shutters that I've just described, as well as the insulated glass, the structural beam across the top, as well as the additional columns required to hold up these structural beams on the outside, the way that the clear glass intersects with the insulated glass, and you can also see how the extension. Now, as for ventilation for the rest of the building, I'd like to incorporate earth tubes. Now these are tubes that go deep into the ground and draw air from the outside, cooled down by the ground that the tubes are travelling through, and then up into the building. Now, as you can see, I'd like to locate them within the C-shape beams around the outside, and then go up through the building, allowing cold air to escape different levels, as you can see by the diagram to the right. Now, an example of this would be in the lecture theatre, as you can see on the next slide. and this is how it would be used in practice. So thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me.